Ladies and gentlemen, let's get real for a moment. Have you ever found yourself constantly giving, showing up, being the nice guy, only to be overlooked, taken for granted, or just not valued the way you hoped? You text first, you chase, you show up, and yet she's not thinking about you. She's not worrying about losing you. When it comes to making a woman genuinely worry about you, one of the most powerful tools you can use is emotional mystery. You see, the problem today is that too many men overshare, overtalk, and overexpose themselves emotionally far too early. And while honesty and openness are important, emotional mystery isn't about lying or playing games. It's about pace. It's about not giving her full access to your soul, your mind, and your emotions right from the beginning. When you tell a woman everything she wants to know about you within the first few days or weeks, when you're too eager to respond, too available to listen, too ready to please, she doesn't feel the need to lean in, to ask more, to wonder. She doesn't feel compelled to invest because you're already right there, and there's nothing left for her to discover. Human nature craves discovery. We are drawn to what we don't fully understand. It's the questions that keep us coming back, not always the answers. When a woman can't quite predict you, when she's unsure what you're thinking, when she notices that you're present but not needy, she starts to think about you more. She begins to analyze your words, your silences, your subtle shifts in energy. That space you leave open becomes the gap her mind wants to fill. And this is not manipulation. This is about not robbing her of the natural process of wondering. It's about allowing her to pursue clarity instead of handing it to her like a checklist of your soul. You don't have to say everything you're feeling all the time. You don't need to over-explain your decisions or justify your silence. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is speak less and let her notice. Let her feel the slight edge in your tone, the slight shift in your attention, the intentional way you hold your emotional cards close to your chest. When she doesn't know exactly how much she matters to you, when she feels she has to earn your emotional presence, she begins to worry. Not because she's afraid you're gone, but because she's unsure where she stands. And that space of uncertainty sparks emotional engagement. That engagement leads to curiosity. Curiosity leads to effort, and effort leads to emotional investment. You must understand this. When you show up with emotional control, when you're calm, confident, and self-contained, you send a signal that you are not desperate for connection. You are open to it, but not starved. And that calmness is what creates emotional tension in the best way possible. She starts to think about you more. She starts to question if she's doing enough. And the moment she feels that emotional imbalance, the moment she senses she's chasing a little more than she expected, the power dynamic shifts. That is when you become unforgettable. That is when you move from convenient to compelling, not by being cold, but by being controlled. Not by withdrawing love, but by protecting your emotional value. Having a purpose bigger than her is one of the most attractive and powerful ways to shift the emotional dynamic in your favor. Because when a woman sees that your life doesn't revolve around her, that your energy is focused on something meaningful, something long-term, something that lights a fire in you from within, she automatically starts to take notice on a deeper level. A man who is focused on building something, whether it's his career, his goals, his health, his passion, or his personal growth, sends a message that he's not looking for a woman to complete him, but to complement him. And that subtle difference changes everything. When your actions show that you are grounded in your own journey, when your priorities clearly reflect that your mission comes first and your relationship second, she starts to feel that she's not the center of your universe. And while that may sound like a bad thing on the surface, the emotional response it creates within her is powerful and magnetic, Most men who get taken for granted are the ones who give up their path the moment a woman walks into their life. They cancel their plans, abandon their routine, and unconsciously make her their new purpose. And the moment you do that, she feels it. She may not say it, she may not even consciously realize it, but deep down, the respect begins to slip. Because now she's no longer chasing the man with drive. She's dealing with a man who's orbiting around her. And women don't worry about men who orbit them. They worry about the men they have to catch up with. The men who make them ask, where is he going next? What's he building? Do I have a place in his future or not? That curiosity is powerful. That tension is what keeps her emotionally present. When you live a life filled with vision and discipline, you naturally become more selective with your time, your energy, and your presence. You don't jump at every text. You don't explain yourself when you're unavailable. You're not ignoring her. You're busy. You're doing what you said you'd do. You're moving towards something greater. And that consistency, that ambition, that quiet confidence, it builds respect. And respect leads to emotional concern. She starts to worry not because you're treating her badly, but because she sees your time as valuable. She sees your attention as earned, not given freely. That's when she starts showing up more intentionally. She'll start checking in more, asking where you are, wanting to know how she fits into your world, rather than assuming you'll always be in hers. A man with a mission doesn't chase validation because he's already fulfilled within. He doesn't fall apart when someone pulls away because his identity is rooted in more than romantic interest. And when a woman senses that she's dealing with someone who doesn't need her for emotional survival, but chooses her from a place of wholeness, that's when the emotional shift begins. That's when she starts to see you differently. That's when she starts to realize you're not just another man looking for a relationship. You're a man building an empire. And being part of that is a privilege she now wants to earn. And when you live this truth consistently, when your purpose guides you more than your feelings do, her sense of urgency rises quietly. Her awareness of your value sharpens. And before she even realizes it, she's the one watching your moves, waiting for your presence, hoping she still has your attention. Setting boundaries without fear is one of the clearest signs of a man who knows his worth. Because boundaries are not walls to push people away, they are standards that teach others how to treat you. When a woman sees that you have lines you do not cross, values you do not compromise, and behaviors you will not accept, she begins to view you through a lens of respect that is deeper than attraction. Too many men today are so afraid of upsetting a woman, so terrified of losing her, that they abandon their standards just to keep the peace, just to be liked, just to avoid conflict. And in doing so, they unknowingly train her to test them, to push past their comfort zones, to challenge their limits. Because if you don't enforce your boundaries, someone else will define them for you. And once you let that happen, the emotional balance starts to shift against you. You don't need to yell, you don't need to explain yourself repeatedly, and you certainly don't need to apologize for expecting to be treated with the same respect you give. Boundaries are quiet power. They are felt, not shouted. When you calmly remove yourself from situations that drain you, when you distance yourself from disrespect instead of trying to fix it, when you say no without guilt and yes without fear, you communicate strength without saying a word, and that strength makes her stop and think. She begins to wonder what your limits are, what your values mean to you, and more importantly, what her place is within those limits. She realizes she cannot walk all over you. She cannot manipulate your emotions. She cannot treat you carelessly and still expect you to stay, because your presence is not given, it's earned. And that awareness makes her pay closer attention to her own actions. A woman begins to worry when she realizes that your peace matters more to you than her approval, that you're not afraid to walk away if something doesn't serve your highest self. And the moment she sees that your connection to your own standards is stronger than your need for external validation, she will either rise to meet you or step back in confusion. Either way, you maintain your power. And from that place of grounded self-respect, you stop chasing the wrong kind of attention and start attracting women who respect what you stand for. Women worry about losing men who know how to protect themselves emotionally, not with games, not with coldness, but with clarity, with calm refusal, with distance that says, I won't participate in anything that hurts my peace. You must understand that boundaries are not about controlling her behavior, they're about controlling what you allow in your life. You are the gatekeeper of your time, your emotions, your energy, and when you honor that role, you become a man who doesn't need to convince anyone to treat him right. He simply walks away from what isn't aligned. And when a woman feels that you're not afraid to leave, when she senses that her words, her patterns, her presence must meet your standards to stay in your life, a shift begins. That shift creates tension, and tension creates emotional investment, and emotional investment is where genuine worry begins to grow, not out of fear, but out of the deep understanding that your time and love are not to be wasted, not to be played with, not to be taken lightly, because you've made it clear with action, not words, that your standards will always come before your desire to be accepted. Pulling back when needed is not about manipulation. It's about self-respect, emotional balance, and preserving your own energy when it's not being met with equal effort. Many men fear pulling back because they think it will push her away, that she'll lose interest, that she'll replace them instantly. But what they don't realize is that constantly being available, constantly being the one to reach out, to initiate, to give more than they receive, teaches her that she doesn't need to put in effort to keep you close. When you never take a step back, she never gets the space to feel your absence, and when she never feels your absence, she never values your presence the way she could. Pulling back is not a punishment to her, it's a reset for you. It's giving yourself the distance to see clearly, to reclaim your energy, to check whether the connection is mutual or one-sided. When you notice her energy shifting, her responses getting shorter, her calls becoming less frequent, when the effort you once received begins to fade, that's your cue not to try harder, not to chase, not to fix, but to step back. Not in anger, not in silence meant to hurt, but in quiet confidence that says, I will not beg for what should be freely given. You don't owe her constant pursuit when she's offering inconsistency. You owe yourself peace. And in that space, in that pause where you stop doing all the emotional lifting, something interesting happens. She notices. She starts to wonder. She begins to feel the shift. Your silence speaks a language far louder than words. It says you're no longer willing to give energy without reciprocation, that your love isn't free of standards, that your time isn't available on demand just because it used to be, and it's in that pullback that real clarity begins to form, not just for you, but for her. She begins to ask herself questions she hadn't before. She notices that your good morning texts have stopped arriving. She sees that you're no longer always watching her stories, liking her posts, making yourself visible. And now she has to do something she hasn't done in a while. Wonder. That wondering leads to internal pressure, emotional discomfort, and then concern. And that concern is what we're talking about. That worry. Not because you ghosted her or treated her coldly, but because you calmly removed your energy when you felt it wasn't being respected. And you didn't announce it. You didn't make a scene. You didn't try to get a reaction. You simply adjusted. And women notice adjustments far more than announcements. This is not about playing games. It's about regaining control over where your emotional investment flows. If she wants to re-enter your world, let her do so through action, not apology. Let her earn her way back into your rhythm, not through sweet words, but through consistent energy. The moment you pull back, you give her the opportunity to show you who she is when she no longer feels your guaranteed presence. That's when her real intentions come forward. That's when you learn if she values you or was simply comfortable with your convenience. A man who knows when to pull back without guilt becomes a man who never has to beg to be valued, because his absence begins to teach the lesson his presence never could. And that lesson is what truly makes a woman stop, reflect, and start worrying about whether she still holds the space in your life she once assumed was hers. Being the man she can't easily replace begins with understanding your own value before anyone else does. When you become someone of depth, someone who invests in his growth, someone who stands out not just for how he looks, but for how he carries himself, how he thinks, how he moves through the world, you naturally separate yourself from the crowd. Most men focus on external attraction, the compliments, the clothes, the cars. But what truly makes a woman worry about losing you is when she senses that you're rare on the inside, that your character, your mindset, your ambition, your energy are things she doesn't come across often. When you're the kind of man who is emotionally intelligent, purpose-driven, calm under pressure, clear on what he wants, and disciplined in his actions, you become a presence she remembers, not a moment she forgets. It's not about being flashy. It's about being focused. It's about becoming the kind of man who doesn't need attention because he commands respect. A man who's building something mentally, spiritually, professionally, always carries a certain energy that draws people in without trying. He doesn't need to talk about himself all the time because his actions do it for him. He doesn't have to prove he's a good man because how he lives proves it silently. And the more grounded you become in your own identity, the harder it becomes for anyone to replace you because you've built yourself into someone of substance, someone who has a presence that lingers even when he's not around. Women notice patterns. They know when they've met someone who's just like the rest. But they also know very quickly when they've encountered something different. And when you become that difference, you become She might meet men who look good, who talk well, who give her temporary butterflies, but she won't meet many who challenge her mentally, inspire her emotionally, and create a sense of calm with their presence. And when you give her that experience, that combination of emotional depth, ambition, maturity, and peace, she won't want to lose it. Because deep down, she'll know it's not easily found again. You make her worry by not being average, by living above the noise, by choosing discipline over comfort, by learning continuously, staying sharp, elevating your standards, and refusing to settle. When you're the man who takes care of his body, sharpens his mind, keeps his circle small, stays in his lane, doesn't seek attention but earns it naturally, that's when women begin to realize they can't treat you the way they treat everyone else. They start to step more carefully. They start to think twice before pulling away, before playing games, before assuming you'll always be there, because you're not chasing them. You're chasing something higher, and that makes them chase you. A woman only worries when she feels she's at risk of losing something she can't replace. So become that something, not by trying to impress her, but by impressing yourself. Not by showing her your worth through words, but by living in a way that shows you already know it. Because once she realizes you're not a man who needs to be chosen, you're the man who chooses, everything changes. Not always being available is a quiet form of power that speaks volumes without a single word being said. When you're constantly available, when you drop everything the moment she calls, when you're the one who always rearranges your schedule just to fit her in, you unintentionally send the message that your time isn't valuable, that your life revolves around her presence, and even worse, that she never, has to earn your attention. People value what they have to work for, what isn't guaranteed, what they feel could be gone if they don't nurture it. And the same goes for relationships. When you're always emotionally, physically, and mentally accessible, there's no room for her to miss you, to think about you, to reflect on your importance in her life, because you never give her the chance to experience what your absence feels like. Women don't worry about men who are always at their beck and call, because those men create emotional certainty. Certainty leads to comfort, and too much comfort can lead to complacency. But the moment you create healthy space, the kind that shows you have your own life, your own schedule, your own commitments, she begins to realize that your time is a privilege, not a guarantee. She starts asking herself where she stands with you. She starts noticing the small gaps of silence. She becomes more intentional with her communication, because she no longer feels like she can text you anytime and expect an immediate response. She starts to consider your time before assuming she has access to it. This doesn't mean you become cold or distant. It means you become selective. You stop responding to every message within seconds. You stop saying yes to last-minute plans that interrupt your own routine. You stop being the one who always initiates conversation, who always follows up, who always gives more than he receives. You create emotional balance by letting her meet you halfway. And in that halfway space, she feels the shift. She notices that you're not always waiting around. She realizes that you have boundaries, structure, and direction, and in that realization, she begins to worry, not out of fear, but out of emotional awareness. She becomes conscious of your value, not because you told her, but because she can feel the difference when you're not immediately available. When a man is not constantly accessible, he forces the woman to rise emotionally. She begins to value his presence more, listen more carefully, respond more quickly, and act with more intention, because she senses that if she doesn't, someone else will. Your availability, when too consistent, removes the mystery, but when it's measured, when it's intentional, it creates curiosity, and curiosity leads to emotional investment. She starts wondering what you're doing, who you're with, why your energy feels more focused. She starts checking your stories more often, waiting for your replies, investing in the small details, because now she doesn't feel entitled to your attention. That lack of entitlement breeds desire, and that desire quietly becomes worry. You don't need to act aloof or disappear entirely. You simply need to show that your life is already full, that your attention is earned through consistency, respect, and shared energy. That while you are open to connection, you are not desperate for it. And when she sees that your availability is no longer a given, she will step up, lean in, and make more effort, because now being close to you feels like something she has to protect rather than something she can take for granted. Making her feel replaced without actually replacing her is one of the most powerful emotional shifts you can create, not through manipulation, but through transformation. This happens when you stop waiting around, stop giving her the emotional comfort of knowing you're still stuck on her, and instead begin focusing completely on building your life without hesitation. It's about moving forward, not moving on. When you begin showing up differently, more focused, more fulfilled, more present in your own journey, she will notice that something has shifted. And what really makes a woman worry is not the idea that you've found someone else, but that you no longer seem emotionally attached to needing her, that your life looks exciting, that your energy feels unbothered, and that you're clearly growing in ways that don't involve her. When a woman sees you start doing things she used to see you hesitate on, going out more, engaging with new people, pursuing goals that you once delayed, looking happier, more confident, more present, she starts to question her place in your story. She starts to feel the emotional distance in a way that silence alone could never create. You haven't replaced her with another woman, but you have replaced her in your priorities. You've placed your peace where she used to sit. You've placed your goals where your worries about her used to live. And that emotional upgrade becomes a silent but powerful reminder that you don't need her to be whole. This isn't about showing off or forcing a fake lifestyle on social media. It's about authentically stepping into your next level. Posts that win not for attention, but because you earned it. Share that moment not to make her jealous, but to celebrate yourself. Start showing up in your physical, mental, and emotional space with a presence that says you are no longer waiting for permission to grow. And what happens when you do this with genuine intention is that she begins to feel the emotional consequences of your absence. She sees your life moving forward. She sees your world expanding. And now she has to sit with the reality that she is no longer the focal point of your attention. A woman doesn't truly start to worry until she sees you become unavailable in a way that feels permanent. Not because you're gone, but because your focus has shifted so completely toward yourself that her presence or absence no longer determines your mood. She starts replaying memories, questioning where things shifted, wondering who is filling the emotional space she once occupied. And while you haven't replaced her with another person, she now feels emotionally replaced by your evolution. And that feeling is what triggers the worry, the introspection, and often the effort to reconnect. You make her feel replaced, not by deleting her, but by upgrading you. You evolve so visibly, so unapologetically, that your new version no longer revolves around the past, and in doing so you quietly shift the power dynamic without saying a word. Your growth speaks for you. Your progress becomes the loudest statement, and she's left with the undeniable truth that the man who once paused his life for her is now moving at a pace she might not be able to catch up with unless she steps up too. Mastering the power of silence is one of the most underrated yet deeply effective tools when it comes to making a woman worry about losing you. Silence is not avoidance, and it's not about withholding love to punish someone. Silence is a language of maturity, of boundaries, of emotional clarity. When you use silence the right way, you don't need to explain yourself repeatedly or argue to prove your worth. You simply step back and let your absence speak what your presence no longer can. In today's world where everyone is always talking, posting, reacting, and defending, the man who can stay grounded and choose stillness over chaos instantly sets himself apart. He doesn't respond to every slight with words. He doesn't try to change a woman's mind by begging or debating. He simply removes his energy from the space where it's no longer valued and lets her feel the shift in a way that words could never deliver. When a woman knows you're capable of walking away from disrespect, from games, from emotional confusion without causing drama, she begins to see your silence as strength, not weakness. That silence becomes a mirror. It reflects her own actions back to her. It makes her confront the space you once filled without trying to fill it for her. It makes her confront the space you once filled without trying to fill it for her. And in that space, worry starts to form. She wonders if she pushed too far, if she took you for granted, if you've already emotionally checked out. She replays conversations, reanalyzes your last words, and starts to sense that your lack of reaction isn't apathy, it's control. A man who uses silence with intention is dangerous in the most attractive way, because he doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. He knows that peace is more powerful than pleading. Silence creates tension. It builds emotional weight. The longer it lasts, the more the other person begins to lean in. And the reason it works so effectively is because it breaks the pattern. If you've always been the one to talk things out, explain your side, reach out first, and now suddenly you don't, the absence of that familiar behavior forces her to react differently. She starts looking for signs that you still care. She becomes hyper-aware of your distance. She checks her phone more often, hoping for a message. She watches your stories for clues. She starts to question your silence, not because you're being cruel, but because she realizes that you're no longer playing the role she had come to expect. You don't have to block her, delete her, or disappear entirely. You just stop feeding the energy that keeps her feeling secure while she gives you less. You let go of the need to always be heard, and instead let the space between you do the speaking. That space is powerful because it forces emotional accountability. It makes her face the possibility that your silence might not be temporary. It might mean you've moved on, emotionally detached, or simply reached a point where you're no longer willing to give more than you receive. And that uncertainty is what makes her worry. When a man knows when to speak and when to go silent, he gains a level of emotional leverage that words can never achieve. Because silence is not the absence of emotion, it's the presence of strength, restraint, and clarity. It's the choice to prioritize your energy, your peace, your value. And once she realizes that your silence holds more meaning than all the conversations you used to have, she begins to understand what she's at risk of losing. Not just your voice, but your presence, your support, your energy, all the things that once made her feel secure. And that is when silence does what no argument ever could. Here's the truth. You don't need to chase. You don't need to beg. You just need to become a man she cannot easily forget. A man with standards, with vision, with emotional control. The goal isn't to make her worry out of fear. It's to make her worry because she realizes she might lose access to a man who truly knows his worth. So stop trying to prove yourself. Start showing yourself. And the right woman, the wise woman, she'll worry. Because she'll know you were never just another option. You